and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Durkin?
Here.
Ms. Eccles?
Here.
She's here. Oh, she's here.
She's got a copy,
Mr.
right?
Blair?
Getting
Here.
copies of the
Mr.
Helsinki
Reed? Here.
Charter.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Did you give me some bad
Vice Chairman
questions?
Seeley?
Here.
And Chairman Hippolyta?
Next thing on the agenda is public comment. Any public comment? No public comment, and we will have additional public comment at the end if time permits. Next thing is the adoption of the March 17th?
I'm sorry, March
Okay.
3rd. That should be at 3.
If everyone's had a chance to review the meeting minutes from March 3rd, can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second?
I'll second.
Richard? Any comment? Hearing no comment, all in favor of approving the March 3rd meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Yes, now we move on to the Article 3 Mayor and City Manager, which we're finishing up on. Larry's provided us with a draft of, as to the best of his ability, of what we've discussed over the last 3 meetings.
I have.
And if you'd like to go through what you
Sure.
have before we move on.
If I could briefly explain, and Dave, sorry, I didn't send this to you yet, but I'll get it to you tomorrow. What I've done is I've tried to put together what we have decided thus far, okay? And it really is basically the first 14 pages of Easton's chart, that's what we've been using thus far. So if you just want to go through these very quickly, on page 2 you can see where we've taken out the district, election by districts. We took that out. Page 3, C, composition, 7 members. We took out, the at-large versus the district kind of things. I think that was a big thing right there. On page 4, and I'm sorry you can't see this very well, but on C-204, where it talks about compensation. If you see the line along the side, that's been added. Everything after that, this was the either-or thing that we talked about. In Easton's charter, it talked about council establishing the compensation by ordinance if they did so at least 6 months prior to the municipal election. What I've added there, as you can see, is in the event council shall fail to establish such compensation by ordinance by at least 6 months prior to the next regular municipal election, then in the event of such failure to act, the said salaries shall be automatically adjusted by the average percentage increase for the 2 years previous to the next regular municipal election received by all department heads, which said adjusted salaries shall be effective on the date of the commencement of the terms of the individuals elected to such positions at the next regular municipal election. The average percentage increase shall be determined by the city manager and presented at a meeting of council, thereafter certified by the city clerk to the necessary election officials prior to the 15th day of February of the year of the said regular municipal election. And of course, the last sentence was already there. So that's my attempt to come up with language. You can look at that, let me know what you think. Why I used the 15th day of February of the day of the year of the municipal election. Under the tax collection law, tax collectors, if any municipality is going to raise their compensation or decrease it, they have to do so by the 15th day of February of the year of the municipal election. So everybody knows it's running for that office, and they take out a petition. They can't take petitions out until after the 15th. So they'll know, oh, this is what I'll be paid. So that's why we put in there by the 15th of February.
And with this, it still leaves the first, council can either raise or lower it. This is just in the absence of any action to raise or lower the compensation.
Right, exactly. So if the council sees that the department has got a 10% increase, and they may not want council to get a 10% increase, they may, adopt an ordinance that says 2%.
So the failure to act will kick in this
Yes.
automatic revision, but they always have the ability to
Pass an ordinance.
change, pass
Yes.
an ordinance to increase it by more than that,
Yes.
or decrease it if they feel
Yes.
it's getting out of whack.
Yes, and that applies only to the people who are elected in the next municipal election. And don't forget, this is every 2 years, because I would think that when you do this, it's 7 council members, you're not gonna have them all elected in 1 year. It's probably gonna be staggered like it is now.
Mhm.
So you'll have like half a council being elected every 2 years. So, okay, so that was that. You can take a look at that, let me know what you think, and, we can change it.
And you feel that this, I mean, there's no real precedence for this, but as far as what you found, everything seems to be.
So long as it
kosher.
applies to new council
Yeah.
people, new terms.
New
I don't
terms.
have a problem with it. However you want to come up with the amount, CPI or this or whatever it is. But we needed somebody to determine what that is, so let's make the city manager do it. He would have been giving the increases. Something the clerk can attest, so.
Okay.
The rest of these are like changes from manager to administrative manager kind of things. Let's see, the next big change, I guess, probably, it doesn't mean we're adopting everything in between, I just turned those pages off. Would have been back on C 3.01, page 11, I guess.
Page number, just.
C 3.01.
Yeah, 3.01. What's your page number?
Oh, no, I don't know back on.
I don't know what's going on.
What page?
I still, I only meet my secretary when I get there. She's very good. This is, I think, what we came up with. You wanted to take the chief executive officer for the mayor out, but we put it back in.
Right.
I couldn't figure out how to get it out once I took it home. So that's why, this is very rough, but I wanted to get something to you guys. And these are sort of some of the things, like the mayor will facilitate in number 3, the submission of the annual budget. And then when you turn the page, well, actually, 9 and 10 were added. I think that's what Heather had wanted. Those 2 things were added. The next page, appointment of the mayor, and I'll have something better for you the next time. The underlining didn't turn out there. On page 12, appointment by mayor, it shows those appointments. Then page 13 continues that. So the mayor would appoint the city manager, city solicitor, assistant solicitors, all members of authority, boards and commission, and that will have in there, if permitted by law. We can get that, that's one thing we missed. And then we took out deputy mayor there. He won't appoint the deputy mayor. And then the next would be the city manager information. We took out what you guys decided to take out about the degree, the master's degree. So we made C 3.04. They are now bullet points instead of numbered. That's what changed there. So that's pretty much where we are. Okay? You want to take that, look at it, and then next week I will bring the new changes that we decide this week and put them all together in draft 2. Okay? And then you can let me know next week if you think all these needs tweaked, and gives you a week to look at it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Any additional comment or discussion to be had on this, or is it something we need to digest and bring any additional comments? I did speak to Wayne today, and I thought, I was going to ask for this. You preemptively must have read our mind and brought it with you. But to see sort of on a periodic basis as we put some of these chapters together, see it on paper, review it in the short term, but I think it's going to be a constant revision. It's something we do later on is obviously going to possibly tweak this, and then hopefully when we get to the very end, there'll be one more sort of at least read through for content and draft, and then some editing and proofreading type drafts at the end, but to periodically get the draft copies of where we've gotten to, make sure that we're all in sync with where that is, and then change if necessary if something in one of these other sections warrants that. I see along the issues of mayor and council, I did talk to Wayne, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to make a decision on it today without him here, but we had asked for some additional information on salaries of councilmen and mayors and managers throughout other communities throughout Pennsylvania. I apologize for my rough voice, and my head feels like it's going to explode, so got a head cold. But anyways, we had some discussion last time on whether or not a starting salary for mayor and council would be included in the charter itself, whether or not we leave that to the transition committee or to city council to establish after the hopeful successful adoption of the home rule charter. I think we've gotten another snippet of some salaries. I'm not sure how that compares with how many were there. How did you
Could I
compile
ask you-
this, or what? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about this specifically, is that the Bethlehem and Scranton numbers, are those the total for the whole council, or is that per person?
Total for the whole council.
Okay, that's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was 42,000 apiece.
No,
You guys
that's
are
my
good.
thought.
Were you gonna run for council in Scranton?
Thank you, that's all I wanted to know.
Probably done anyone as I could get to respond.
But I think that the feelings of the commission were very close last time on whether or not we should or shouldn't. I think I want to table that till we have all 7 members, since I think it was in the 4-3 range one way or the other, with including those types of things. How were you able to compile this, and what was the limiting factor
I'm
as far
thinking,
as?
based on Wayne's comments and your comments from last time, somebody asked for the 5 above us and
Okay,
5
5
below.
below.
So we tried to go by that, and when we did the 5, there were some optional charters in there, so we tried to add a couple extra, because I didn't know how you felt about those being in there, so really didn't want to skip over them, so we just added some extra and went 5 above our population, 5 below, and used home rule charter communities. Now, I talked to Wayne today also, and he asked for the top 10 cities, third-class cities, salaries. I don't know, some of these are probably,
Second,
Would
well,
cover.
Scranton's second.
yeah, they might be
They're
second
in a
class,
class
so
of their own.
I didn't get that far,
Yeah.
because it was, I was still.
Most of the rest are probably third, regardless though.
Lancaster.
Because you only have 2 first class, you have 1 second class.
So I don't know if that's regardless of their form of government?
I think in general, yeah, I think it wouldn't matter whether it's
Okay.
home rule or not.
I'll get that, and then I can just forward to you by email. That was late this afternoon.
The ones that don't have the 5 after it, is that a per person salary?
That's what I was doing.
Lebanon, Easton, Lancaster?
Yes, I think 8,000, I'm not sure about the 8,000. I wanna check into that one. Some of these Kim helped me with, and we were just running out of,
Okay.
I don't know, I'm not comfortable with that one. I know on the other ones though, that that's based on, see, this 3,600 is another one. That would be, not the annual, that's probably more. You get $3,600 each.
But
The
that one
mayor
has
gets
5,
48,
so.
there's
yeah.
5 of them.
So some of these 5s
Yeah, the other ones
are divided by
divided
5,
by 5. This one is
Probably not.
annual.
or else they get paid even less now too, if that's being divided by 5.
Yeah, I need to make sure of that. That's a start though, but you said you weren't gonna really, I will re-email it once I double check. I just ran out of hours.
And at this point, in our draft charter, that raise provision is both in for council and the mayor position.
That's how I have it worded, and the controller, actually,
Okay.
if you have a controller. Right now, like you said, if you go without a controllable, change that.
Yeah. Okay, so, is there any further discussion on the salary, or, does everyone agree that we wait for some additional information and make a decision? I don't think it's critical, I think it's just one line item in here, although it may have a big effect on the perception, but, you know, I think that there's good reasons for and against placing it in the charter, and we'll debate that once we get all the information. I think you can see, though, from the charters who did try to write it in, they were woefully off of where it ended up being, so, you know, I think an attempt to make a realistic number, should we decide to put one in there, would be prudent.
Did you say these are all very moral?
Well, it says whether or not they are.
And then you were gonna try, well, I
Well, they're
guess I
third,
meant-
but he expanded the range to 10 instead of 5, basically.
Yeah, they basically asked me for third class cities, regardless, I guess, of what
Yeah,
their
form.
form of government is.
Okay, so you're, those are,
10.
you're gonna get those
Mhm.
and then do the council salaries, figure those out. Yeah, that'll be good if we get that information tonight.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Our agenda. One of the other things I talked to Wayne about and why I brought the charter for Farrell was to look at some of these other articles. And I think there's been somewhat of a consensus to try to keep the charter as simple as possible and not, you know, extra copies here, and if
Thank you.
anyone else in the audience, I think I made like 14, so if there's anyone else
Mhm.
who would like one, is to possibly look at the Farrell as our basis for discussion, and then insert from whatever other charters anyone has any comments or provisions that they think are important for some of these. Yep. Just help. Easton sort of goes off in a bunch of different directions, and this sort of is boilerplate is what Farrell's is, in my opinion. I know we had a couple different people who have different potential charters to use as baseline. But for tonight, on the agenda, maybe one of the ones we can start to look at would be Section 11, Administrative Departments. This is an example of how plain and empowering Farrell's charter is. Administrative departments. Obviously, there's many more articles in this than what we had, but some of the specific sections we had in the outline from Easton are just separate articles in the Farrell. There's not really any more or less information. It's just sort of the way they set up their appendix. But in administrative departments, if we could just maybe discuss that one for a minute and see if this is the direction. What's the number you talking about? 11? Okay. That's 11, right?
Yeah, they're all the items that you looked at. That's what I
Yeah, I
asked.
know, I think this is what he was, I did the
Oh,
same thing,
okay, I
because
see
in the
what you're
beginning it
saying,
says
yeah.
11.
Administrative
Yeah.
departments.
Administrative departments, no page numbers, so. So this is a 2-page section, and this is one direction that we could go, and I'd just like to discuss the overall. But on 1111,
Whatever.
1102, general provisions, creation of departments, you know, this is how general this is. Council may establish boards, commissions, authorities, city departments, offices, or agencies in addition to those created by this charter, may prescribe the functions of all boards, commissions, authorities, departments, offices, and agencies, except for no function assigned by the charter to the particular board, commission, authority, agency, office, may be discontinued, or unless the charter specifically provides or assigns to any other. Basically, the way I read it, and maybe you can comment, is that unlike the third-class city code where it prescribes certain departments that must exist in the city, this pretty much leaves it wide open for the council to organize the city the way that it feels best serves the city. I think that some of the discussion we've been having to make a charter that is flexible enough to last well into the future, I think that something like this where we don't define the departments and their specific roles or write into the charter what we think each of the departments must include and do is the most flexible way to proceed. Is there any discussion on, review the rest of it, or is there any discussion on that method of defining it? I mean, you know, for instance, there's no sort of public works, there's no zoning, there's no fire, there's no police. If you look through Farrell's charter, they don't address any of that, that the organization of those departments and whether or not to keep it the same or to change or combine or abolish or create new departments will be completely left to future city councils.
Richard, pardon the interruption, this is Dave.
Yep.
I would be in favor of, as I guess I have in the past, not saying anything about that that level of management, which might be misconstrued by others as micromanaging the city. So if that's what Farrell has, then I would be in favor of that.
Okay, and maybe if we could review some additional provisions here. Direction manager, all departments, offices, and agencies under direction and supervision of the manager shall be administered by an officer appointed by and subject to the direction and supervision of the manager. With the consent of council, the manager may serve as head of one or more such departments, offices, or agencies, and may appoint one person to head two or more of them. So basically, it's giving the flexibility to have a situation similar to what we have now, where Omar is, you know, the manager and head of a couple departments. So it does allow for the flexibility of if there's not enough work, or if the manager can handle additional work to head those departments as he sees fit, in cooperation with council as well.
Is there a comparable section in Easton that we have been following? Kind of looking through that, and
Did they address it at all, though?
well, that's kind of what I'm wondering is what other folks have done. One thing that I guess I'm going to say that I think that we
Easton,
need to
yeah.
know.
Section 4.
Okay, that we need to know before any future meetings is that we had been setting out that we were going through the charter kind of article by article.
Correct.
And so this kind of takes us out of what we had planned on doing today. And so I think some of us may not have prepped for this today, and I think we need to give consideration to everyone on the commission, the time to go and look to see what other people have done when we approach a particular article instead of throwing it out at the particular meeting.
Okay.
So I think in that sense, I'm fine with discussing it today, but I think that in the future we need to make it clear before the meeting what articles we're going to discuss from where,
Okay.
so that we're all prepared for that. With that said, you know, we have heard over time and time again that we want to give flexibility with the home rule charter. But I'm also going to say that I don't necessarily think that flexibility for flexibility's sake is necessarily a great thing. I think that the whole reason that we have the charter or all these things in the first place is to lay down how things are supposed to happen. So if we wanted to give the greatest amount of flexibility, we could just say, there's no charter, you know. We elect a mayor and council and let them duke it out for whatever they want to duke it out for, period. And, but that's certainly, I mean, that's taking things to the extreme.
Yeah, correct.
And I just illustrate that in the sense that flexibility, total flexibility is not a good way to operate either. And so we do need to have some bounds that we operate within to keep, if we happen to get the wrong people elected, so to speak, maybe that's the wrong way to put it. But if we happen to get, I think Dave might have this kind of thing in mind, that if we get people elected who maybe aren't being reviewed properly and decide to go off the deep end in some particular way, and of course we can't recall them, we have no way to review them, or to, you know, look at what they're doing, have a performance review each year, that there is no performance review, period. That I think without any kind of bounds, I'm afraid of where that could go. And so I think that's, but with that said, I also recognize we want to get more flexibility than what the third-class city code has. So I'm not saying that we need to go to what the third-class city code has, but I want to challenge the thought that total flexibility is what we're after as well. I don't think that is what we're after.
And I think that that's where we are with the discussion. Obviously, there are certain departments that exist within the city now. Some of them prescribed by third-class city code, some maybe not. And I think that one of our missions here is to either memorialize those in a charter so that the current city tree structure continues to exist as it is, if that's what we think is best, or providing a flexible path for city council to continue on as it is if they choose so, or to abolish or combine or make additional departments as they see fit going forward. And how do we either provide that flexibility or not provide that flexibility, or, you know, sort of memorialize a specific department in the charter, therefore it can only be changed by a future referendum.
I think that itemizing them and recognizing the ones that are important to the city. I get really fearful of that last sentence in section B under 1102. With the consent of council, the manager may serve as head of one or more such departments, offices, or agencies. Quite honestly, I'm comfortable with what he does now, but I wouldn't be comfortable to see him in charge of the police department or in charge of fire department. Just wouldn't make good sense. I mean, I don't think the manager's trained for that, quite honestly.
And he would need, under this provision, he would need the consent of council. You're
Yeah, I
assuming they would
realize
give it to him?
We just don't know that. I mean, this leaves it out there. It's really out there.
Is there anything that would preclude that at this point in the under third class city code?
You mean having the manager as the head of the police department?
Correct.
The way this is written, he could be.
I mean, right now,
Or
he's serving
should be.
more than one function as it exists. Does there, anything in third class city code preclude him from serving under, as the department head of other certain
I
departments?
believe the chief has to be from the police force itself. Isn't that the case?
Under the third class.
Yeah, under
Correct.
third class city code. So he would have had to have been a member of the police department. Like a
This
police
is,
officer.
well, this is kind of like bringing up the issue of, we said that, we struck it out, but that the manager would have to have some formal training in business administration, so to speak, or government administration. I would think that a police chief would have to have some formal training or experience in.
Well, yeah. a
You
You have
chief
to
would
be
do
police
the
Act
work.
120 certified
120,
currently
Okay, right,
Yeah,
okay.
carry
in that
it out.
position.
That's
And
what the
I
chiefs
would,
would
and I would
carry
assume
out.
that there's a similar situation for the head of the fire department.
I
So,
would
so
think so.
would this, so from what you just said, it may be that the manager could not serve.
But it'd be precluded for other reasons. But I think
Yeah.
it sort of boils back to the point that, are you going to put trust in city council to not do that if it's not in their best
Well-
interest to do so?
Okay, but what I
Or do
guess.
we need to write into protections into the charter so that they can't?
It sounds like there's already some checks and balances in place that can't
Right.
happen anyway.
That's what I think I just
Right.
heard, is that
No,
there's
you
a, there's a
use
state law that actually
She's
says that
saying
the
that
head of the
actually
police
would-
chief has to have some
You have to have
certification,
that
right?
You have to have,
Oh,
and it
because
has to
that's-
be a
that's gonna-
current certification. It can't be, in fact, you have to actually be hired as a police officer
With Act 120.
with Act
But
120.
you
And
could have,
that is written at what level of state law?
That's the state law under the Municipal Police Officers Training and Education.
Okay, and that supersedes this?
Yes, it would be,
Okay.
it would be.
Yes.
The chief is talking about if you want to arm your chief. If your chief is going to be, if Act 120 certified.
That's not what I'm
means
discussing.
That they
Yeah,
can
that's
carry a
not what I'm
weapon,
talking about either.
right? They can carry a weapon.
Well, to have any powers as police.
And arrest powers and carry a weapon. You think usually of carrying a weapon?
it could work the other way under this provision though too, that you could actually hire the current chief as your city manager, in which case they could serve as both. They would already be certified for that and could serve as a city manager as well. So I guess the question that we're going to have on all these cases going forward is what prohibitions to preclude some sort of perceived conflict that we want to defend against in the charter versus allowing city council to be elected to carry out the business of the city and not do anything.
I guess I'm thinking, I want to know what superseding state law says about who can be, I guess that this really comes up with chief and fire chief, I suppose. I mean, maybe there's other issues, but I'm thinking those two. And, but now I'm hearing maybe it's only if the police chief carries a gun. But
And
No,
that's
no.
the rest of it. What if you want a police commissioner? Some cities have police commissioners, and they aren't actually the chief.
Mhm.
This would give them the ability to appoint a commissioner to oversee maybe,
Or you could have a Department of Public Safety
Yes.
that would oversee both
yes.
fire and police, and have police chiefs and fire chiefs under that person, but under one head, department head. And there's all kinds of possibilities. I'm not precluding to say that city council is going to move forward in that direction, but is allowing the flexibility to evolve in the future if that's what the city
That's a
needs.
good example, yes.
That's, that's sort of, and, for instance, like the city engineer, under third-class city code, is very specific, the requirements of the city engineer. If you read through Farrell's charter, there's nothing that we even talk about public works or city engineer or anything like that. So that department and its qualifications and the person who heads it would be completely left to city council to staff and.
So is there a superseding authority at the state that says the city engineer has to have engineering certificates of?
All engineers have to have certificates, right? I mean.
Well, right, to be an engineer,
Right, to be an
but to
engineer.
be the city engineer,
Well,
I don't know if that's the same.
Well, we would be getting away from the third-class city code. You wouldn't even need a city engineer. If you didn't want one, they could hire an engineer every time they won a project.
That may be cheaper.
It may be.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's exactly right. But this third-class city code makes them have
Yeah, okay, all
an
right.
engineer.
And I'm not saying that the current city council would get rid of the current
No,
city
Right, I
engineer.
get that, yeah.
Does us allowing the flexibility that if they determine in the future that's the direction they want to go, do we want to allow them that flexibility, I guess is where the key question is. Or do we think the city engineer is so important that it must be written into the charter so that that provision is carried on once this third-class city code drops away? And I think you have to look at each of the departments, and, and then when you go through Farrell, they do have some things on finance and some other things where they did memorialize, parts of their, in parts of their charter, but other things like the city engineer, police, fire, public health, those sorts of things were not addressed in their charter and left up to this section, which is administrative departments, giving city council the full authority to establish those boards, commissions, councils, authorities, departments, agencies.
All right, so I think before I'm really comfortable with this, what I'd like to hear, we have the police chief here, but I'm thinking I want to hear from 4 people. One's the police chief, one's the fire chief, and then from, I suppose it's whoever the,
Finance?
no, maybe it's the workers rep, whoever that would be, under you.
Absent?
Yeah, no, not asking,
Not
but
asking.
for the police chief for the fraternal order.
Oh,
So both from an administrative
All right,
level
we
and
went,
from,
okay.
and from the lower level, what they view as the weak points or the strong points about this, to find out what, because you're gonna know a lot more about this than I do. And so I think you could speak directly to what I think you probably understand my concerns, and you can speak directly to those, and the same thing within the fire department. Because while this seems okay to me, I want to make sure that it's not going to cause some huge problem down the road.
I still think if you let that last sentence out of B, it eliminates the problem.
Yeah, but I agree with you to some degree. But if we have seen, there currently is a need in the city now where, one department head is serving as both the manager and 2 other
Yeah,
department
I
heads.
agree.
At
However,
point.
this is so ambiguous that it could mean any department, and it doesn't preclude that. It just gives you a general statement.
It could just mean that the manager is the head of all departments. I mean,
Well, it could, but with consent of council, so
No,
I guess
I
we're
get
leaving
that,
up
sure.
to, some municipalities and cities are so small that maybe the manager is more or less the head of all departments. And you wouldn't, if the city shrunk to such a degree that it wasn't necessary to have multiple individual department heads.
Sure.
I guess, by this though, they could also abolish a lot of those departments, in which case whatever functions or, requirements that would stem from that department would all be assumed in one.
And that may be the flexibility that we're talking about, that we kind of want, but at the same time, I think it also means that you have someone who's the head of a whole lot of departments who knows a little bit about each department, but really doesn't know much about each department, and maybe not enough to really be the head of that department.
Yeah, and I think it boils back to
And-
the overriding question is, how much do we trust future city councils to make the proper decisions and not do that if it's not in their best interest, versus us having to memorialize some constraints or prohibitions in the charter to preclude them from being able to do certain things where we don't trust them to administer that power that we would give them.
I think that's why we set in there for the city manager to be able to appoint his department or her department heads so that they are selecting or have the ability over the years to have qualified people under them, because no one person's gonna know everything about every department. That's why it's important to have good people under them. So, and that's why we talked about having the mayor being able to appoint the city manager and all that. So I think, you know, we have to be able to trust whoever's appointed as the city manager to select the right people for the departments too. But, I mean, but I can see your concern about, you know, some of the specific departments. I think it would be worth, you know, further discussion just to make sure we're not missing anything. But I do agree with what Dave said, that I would prefer to let the flexibility there, because I don't think we talked about that. I don't know where the future's gonna take us. If we do get some right people in the right places, this, you know, the city could turn and do
Run
some
more efficiently.
exciting things, you know, and we don't wanna build too many strings in there that can't do what they need to do, so. But we should talk about it further, I think, just to make sure, 'cause I don't, like you said, I don't think we, you know, obviously we don't have enough information.
Is it, if we have a department head here, I was wondering what he thought. About the, it's more specifically about the city manager running more than one department.
I mean, I agree, you know, flexibility may require managers running more than one department in the future. We don't know what the future's gonna bring, but yeah, I in general, I wouldn't try to prescribe too much. I mean, we've done a lot of some department shifting in the past 5 years. It's worked quite well. But no local government commission could have foreseen being a good idea, you know, 20 years prior. So, I mean, who knows what the future's going to bring for Altoona, and we may need to downsize to that point someday.
But much of the current structure, because I mean, city planning, zoning, you know, your departments, public works, I mean, a lot of those are created and, you know, mandated by the third class city code at this point in time. So, you know, somewhat limited in how much flexibility we have at this point to combine or change or morph departments into. Yeah, I think the question is how much flexibility do we want to leave to them and any transition committee that would recommend future changes, and how much city council would put what's in place and then just have the option in the future to change things
You
going
bring up
forward.
an interesting point, because one of the things that I can't, you write this charter, it's passed by the residents, the administrative code is gonna be left up to the current city council. How stringent or how permanent is the city code, or am I saying it correctly? The
It's not a-
administrative code.
It's not a permanent document, because that's adopted by ordinance, and it can be changed by ordinance by later councils, or by the same council.
For instance, in this particular, you know, it says the city council by ordinance, administrative code for the city, said code shall be adopted within 6 months of the effective date of the charter. So basically what they're gonna take is everything between, the administrative code, from what I understand, maybe you can speak to it better, takes the gap between the charter and what needs to happen for the city to conduct its business, fills in the blanks in a flexible way, whereas the charter is relatively inflexible without the referendum, basically.
Right. That's a good summation. There's certain things the state law won't allow us to get rid of, and that would be zoning hearing board. The city has zoning, so they always have to have a zoning hearing board. That's state law. That's municipalities' planning code. That governs all municipalities. So even if we said no zoning board in here, we need a zoning board. We don't have it.
But for instance, in this administrative code, what the next step would be, if we adopted this administrative department's provision just as it was, the next step would be for the city council to write an ordinance that would either memorialize the current departments as they exist at the next level down, just
That's
not
right.
at the charter level.
That's exactly right.
So to as much detail as they wanted to go into how different departments would function, how they would be staffed, and who would head them, that would be written into the administrative code, either by more or less adopting what we currently have in place, or by potentially rewriting it and reorganizing it. And then that could be changed from time to time as council sees fit. Whereas if we memorialize it in the charter, that must be the blueprint that they start from, and then they fill in the blanks from whatever point we leave off at.
So I'm looking at Easton, and in their articles, they have, yeah, Article 4, they have city controller, what? 13. They have city controller, which maybe we do or don't have, Office of City Solicitor, Department of Finance. And then after that, they throw it all under the administrative code.
So it's very similar to what we did.
It is actually. And in the administrative code, I'm thinking this is where, if I'm reading, unless I'm
Yeah,
missing
there's
it,
no
this is where,
departments.
yeah, it actually doesn't specify anything about the,
Well, I think if you remember when we
police
talked
or fire or
with Allentown,
works or anything.
we didn't go the direction of Allentown, but basically in Allentown, all the departments were completely at the whim of the mayor. And he could come in with his administration and organize his whole executive branch and all the departments and the city manager whatever way he wanted. So he could basically abolish unilaterally with the budget approval, obviously.
See, because I'm kind of thinking that the tree, certainly in terms of the way things like finance or zoning and, that kind of stuff works, that's administrative code. And that's something that council adopts by ordinance, right? And they can re-adopt it by ordinance, whatever, right? I guess in a way, maybe Easton is even more silent on this than Farrell is.
Yeah, I think.
That's the conclusion I'm coming to.
Yeah, I think it's as if you compare and contrast them, and that's why I hope to bring in, I mentioned at the last two meetings about looking through Farrell's, because I think that it's a very simple, easy to understand blueprint to which we can use a lot of these other charters to add and subtract where we think that maybe it stops short of some of the provisions. But I think to take one of these that's very micromanagement, to use Dave's, and to strip it away is a little bit tougher than to take one that's very simple, and then where we see a gap where we think we need some more protections to add it in. So, even just looking back down through the rest of this, the personnel system, the council shall establish by ordinance a personnel system for the city. The system shall be established upon merit principles and other recommendations submitted by the city manager. Merit principle, current position, and future appointments, promotions of city officers, employees shall be held and or made solely on the basis of merit and fitness demonstrated by examination or other evidence of competence. The merit principle shall further extend to providing equal opportunity for employment for advancement of employees without regard to political affiliation, race, color, national origin, sex, or religious creed. Then it goes on to some personnel roles, and this is sort of, 11 points to, and Dave will like the last one, of course. The classification of city positions based on duties, authorities, responsibilities of each position with adequate provisions for reclassification of any position whenever warranted by changing circumstances. A pay plan for all city positions. Methods for determining the merit fitness of candidates and appointments or promotions. Policies and procedures regulating the reduction in force and disciplinary action, including suspension or removal of employees. The hours of work and provisions for sick, vacation leave, and holidays, and provisions for overtime and compensation. The policies and procedures governing persons holding provisional appointments. The policies and procedures governing relationships with employee organizations. Policies regarding in-service training programs. Grievance procedures, including procedures for hearing of grievance by the manager. Other practices necessary for the administrative of city personnel system. And then number 11, all employees shall participate in a yearly personnel evaluation. And then there's a complex which basically goes back to what we're talking about there, that no personnel procedure or policy established under this division of the charter shall be in conflict with the acts of state legislature providing or collective bargaining and administration. So that's sort of the catch-all to say, still gonna follow all state rules and regulations as related to this. So, this charter is basically laying out, we want these rules to be established, but we're not necessarily saying what those rules are. The administrative code, we have to fill in the blanks. They're basically saying, you need a grievance policy, we're not gonna try to write it here into the charter. But that you must have that. And then number 11, all employees shall participate in yearly personnel evaluation. They're not trying to micromanage and write, what that will entail, but they're dictating that you will have one, and you will establish some sort of administrative code that will provide for yearly personnel evaluations. So, I think that this goes to where, we're discussing, are all 11 of these required? Do they go far enough, or do we need to add a number 12 somewhere? Or is this even, everyone's had a chance to review different charters. Is this format that Farrell has plain and simple enough, and is it something that we can use for these other sections to be the basis that we add and subtract from?
Richard, pardon the interruption. This is Dave.
Okay.
Did you talk to Wayne about the Farrell charter?
Yes, I did.
Because to some extent, I agree with the other Richard that if we start mixing our format or mental models or constructs, we run into a little problem here. Although I would agree with you that Farrell's charter represents a very good one. It's short, it's simple, it is silent on many things, which I tend to agree with, and I like it, but I'm not sure how we can, and being there, I'm a little confused. Was the Farrell's charter passed out tonight, or was that in a previous meeting?
We've had it for previous meetings, but I brought an extra copy just in case people didn't have their copy with them.
Okay, is it your assessment, Richard Fury, that the Farrell charter is superior to the other charters?
Yes, and I've had this discussion with Wayne both today in preparation for today's meeting, knowing that he wasn't going to be here, and at previous times, that for the mayor and council was sort of the hybrid model that we were looking for. Easton's charter, as far as the mayor and the council and to some degree the city manager, was more along the lines of the direction that we were choosing to go with empowering the mayor. When you read Farrell's on those particular positions, it's a pretty far deviation for what they have. But when you look at all the rest of the things that don't deal with specifically the mayor or the council, that Farrell's was more clean cut on the departments and all the other sections that we're going to be doing. So the city clerk, city treasurer, city attorney, administrative departments, the financial procedures, contracts, recall, general provisions, transition continuity, initiative, and referendum. That's my opinion. And there's 7 of us here, so we all get to have one. It's my opinion that Farrell was the best place to start from on all those other provisions.
Well, having read the Farrell charter several times, at least a couple of weeks ago, I would agree with you, and I'm glad you've identified the Farrell charter. I would say not even use some of the Farrell stuff unless we absolutely have to.
Correct.
For
And
instance,
that's where I'm talking on these 11 provisions for the personnel rules. Are all those necessary? Are all those, it's sort of like when we went through the mayor and all the provisions in the Easton Charter on the prohibitions. As we read through some of them, we had modified or deleted maybe a couple. It's one of those things where if it's there and you read it, you decide whether you want it or not. But when it's not there, what sparks you to think to have to add it? And I think that goes to Bob's point on his concerns over, the last sentence there with the manager may serve as one or more such departments. If we agree that there's some safeties that need to be put in there, that that could be true except for fire and police, if we decide that that's a protection we need to write into this, or a prohibition we need to write into this, then so be it.
Yeah, I appreciate Bob's comments and Richard Flaren's also. In reference to Bob's, it baffles my imagination to be able to take into account any potential challenge to, leadership in the future, and to try to take some of that into account for a selected individual department or leader. I get stumped because I'm just thinking, well, there's a myriad of other people who might be doing weird stuff, and we can't possibly protect the city from that type of situation. There are just too many. There are going to be too many of them.
Yeah, and
So once again, I come back to the point: the less is more. The less you say, and I think whoever said that you need to trust your leaders, whether it be Bev or somebody else, that's basically what it comes down to. If you trust your leaders and give them an outline within which to work, I think that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, I think that it loops back around on that particular issue. It loops back around. It says the consent of council. So, is that enough of a check and a balance to, unless they really think it's a good idea that the city manager also serves as the police chief, they're probably not going to let that happen. And is that enough of a check and a balance, or is this one particular instance where we want to write a little bit more into it and say, except in the case of police or something like that?
It also has this in here at the end, like you said, that provision of this charter shall be in conflict,
No
with,
provision.
no provision, with the acts of the state legislature providing, for that. So, I mean, you could add something in that paragraph if you wanted to that basically said that it can't.
My problem with writing something specific into this one is it's not specifically enumerating that department to begin with. So, you're sort of creating a conflicting provision where, the police department is nowhere mentioned in this whole charter. Therefore, you're talking about a director that hasn't been empowered by the charter to begin with. Now, we assume that there's other reasons why you have to have a police force and that will, in fact, happen. But
Yeah, I'm fine with the 11, by the way, if we're that's really the question right now. I don't really see that we need to add to that. Or take away from it. In fact, I think I'm okay with just the whole personnel system. So.
So that's on our current agenda. That would be Article 4, Officers, Departments, and Agencies, which, we can also read through if anyone thinks it's a necessary exercise in light of the fact that sort of threw the barrel at you. Officers, Departments, and Agencies from Easton. I think if you read through that, now the city controllers handle a little bit differently in Farrell. Actually, I have city controllers, city treasurer, city clerk, city manager. But I think if we read through that, it's quite a bit more convoluted than the way Farrell had addressed it. And that was my reasoning for recommending Farrell as the basis once we got out of the mayor and city council section.
So do you see that we would be including a city treasurer or controller?
I also talked to Wayne about that. I think on the financial management side of the charter and the city controller portion, that it'd be prudent to have potentially Omar and AC attend a meeting where we talk about those specific issues.
I think as a point of just organization, we can include this text. I don't think this text needs to stand out on its own as a different section. I like the fact that in the Article 4 Easton, it throws all the departments in one article.
Yeah, and I think
I think that's a clean way to do it.
I think if you look at the index, you're really talking city clerk, city treasurer, potentially city attorney, and administrative departments. Even though they have more articles, a lot of them are combined into one here, and how we choose to format it is.
I know. I just think it's a easier to read way of looking at it. But But that's a pretty minor issue. Um, okay.
So on the financial management side and the controller side, Wayne and I talked about possibly tabling that particular discussion so that we would have them here to testify to the commission and advise us to the current operation of the city and what sorts of provisions need to be written into the charter and what the needs potentially for the city controller, or lack of need for the city controller should we move forward. I think,
Richard, is it the Farrell charter that eliminates the city controller?
yes, they have a city treasurer, and we would have to read through that section to see how it differs. What they have basically is a city treasurer, section number 9, and a financial procedures, section number 12, which would provide for some of those financial checks and balances, but they do not have a city controller.
Does Easton have a city controller?
Yes.
And is the city treasurer an elected position in Farrell?
Yes.
Yes. So it's just a different name for controller then.
One of the charters that we have available to us, there was a paragraph as to even why they eliminated the city controller position. I don't know which one it was, but I remember reading it and I remember thinking that, well, that's maybe a good idea and certainly a novel approach to internal financial consistency.
And I have had some conversations with AC, and I would rather he repeat his own position on his feelings about the duty of city controller at a point when he would be able to attend. I did talk to Wayne and AC about him attending potentially a upcoming meeting, but with the April 15th deadline for taxes, he preferred that be handled after April 15th. So Wayne also agreed that we possibly will look at some of the other sections of the charter in the meantime and loop back around to financial when possibly he and Omar, AC and Omar could be available for a meeting or two where we specifically deal with the financial side and staffing of the city. Does anyone have any comment on that, or does that seem like sort of we'll end up jumping around a little bit on these articles?
Well, if we need to wait for them, I think it's more important to wait for them than it is to try and put.
Discuss it without sort of the affected people here to speak on behalf of the city and what protections they feel need to be written into the charter. I think would be potentially a little bit of a waste of time. So looking at that, we're still dealing with the departments and agencies and officers of the city. Some other things that fall under that, which maybe don't involve that, would be the city clerk and city attorney, which we have both of those here. So those are two other potential sections of the Farrell charter that we could look at, which also deal with departments and.
Before you do that, have we decided on the administrative code general provisions? It sounds like, if I'm hearing this correctly, Bob, you want the last sentence of B out, and you'd be okay with this provision?
If you don't put that in though, then that leaves it open that they can do even more than that. I think you need to leave that plus add maybe a protection or two. I don't know that if the lack of it saying that would allow them to potentially do that without the consent of council.
You could certainly add, with the exception of the fire and police.
I think the thing that I'm looking at is a possible exclusion of certain departments based on some training or certification level that they need to have at the site level, and I just don't know what those requirements might be.
Well, we could write something like that in,
Mhm.
unless the department head is required by the state to be licensed.
Exactly. And they have something like that, was it here, I think it was.
was last-
In Easton, I think I was
Oh,
looking at
okay.
it.
The conflicts,
Yeah, it's
section
in
C somewhat addresses
The end of
that, maybe it just
11.
doesn't go as far.
At the end of our list of 11, there's that one sentence, maybe I'll use something like that.
What are you talking about? If it's in conflict with the CBA, collective bargaining agreement?
Well, yeah,
Well,
it
it
says
says,
conflict with state acts of the state legislature providing for collective
That's what
bargaining.
they're talking about, collective bargaining.
That's just contracts, that's not
Yeah, right.
police chief or the fire chief.
That's right.
I would be comfortable if you added it, if you added to the sentence, with the exception of fire force.
Are we assuming this is like indefinite?
I'm not assuming anything in this case, it's just,
Meaning
Next
like,
time we do this.
No, I mean, with the consent of council, the manager may serve as the head of one or more such departments. Is that indefinite? Is this in a time of
Yeah, I know what you mean.
emergency?
yeah, it could be like
Could be
temporary,
both.
is it temporary or permanent? It would all depend on what the needs are at the time.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it, you know, to take Dave's business approach to it. If the city manager sees that some departments aren't in need of a full-time, you know, if one full-time person can oversee 2 departments on a permanent basis, that those efficiencies would be with the consent of council approved to say, yeah, we agree that human resources and whatever, you know, I had the departments of the city pulled up here that, you know, that human resources and finance department can be run by one person. Or in this case, where the city manager is also running the finance department, and in this case, the human resource department currently, correct? You know, Elmore's running all 3. Now, whether or not, you know, the city council wants to approve him to do that permanently, or whether or not they want to say in the interim, but we want that position replaced, I mean, that would be where I see the consent of council that's going to determine how long those savings versus understaffing.
Well, if it was
go
temporary, I
on.
can see just needing approval of council, but if it was permanent, would it require a change to the administrative code?
Potentially, I mean, are you, by giving one department head authority over 2 departments, are you effectively combining those departments? I think that would be up to city council to decide whether they want to. If you're saying one person can run 2 different departments, are you effectively creating one larger department?
Well, that's what A says. A says that the council may establish
Yeah, change it.
authorities, city departments, agencies, whatever, as long as it's not prescribed somewhere else in the charter.
Or,
Paraphrasing, but.
And there's an
So, yeah.
overriding article, I think, that's here that, you know, I don't know if it's in the beginning or somewhere, but, you know, most of these have one big catch-all that says discharge in effect to the degree that it doesn't interfere with state and federal law, and, you know, all those sort of things supersede it as applicable.
Yeah, and basically, I'm okay with this pending hearing from the experts who know whether we need to throw in some extra guarantee that we're having people who really know what they're doing in charges of these important departments.
Maybe you want to include all departments in that. I don't know why you're focusing on police and fire.
You're probably very correct.
Public Works, I think, would require an engineer as much as police would require a chief. I mean, management is not child's play. It can be handled by any bureaucrat.
Right.
Thank you.
The manager can't go to the pages.
I mean,
I would think.
you have to have a certification for planning. I mean, you probably want to talk about if you want to guarantee the existence of every department, then do it. If you don't, don't.
better take the sentence out, folks.
You can't take it out, or you give them
If you
even more
take it
power.
out, then you give them
Certainly
more
said.
than,
If you take it out, then the absence of the sentence gives them more power than what the sentence is.
If council decides to write that into the administrative code.
Correct, but they can change that at any time. So if you don't put safety nets into the charter, the absence of saying anything gives them all the power.
I have to.
At least this gives them the consent of council. If you take the sentence out, you're basically giving the city manager the authority to unilaterally do these things. Would that be correct?
You could argue that.
I guess I'm stuck that I want to give the flexibility for
Mhm.
council to do what they deem as necessary. And it bothers me that maybe the right way is that you might get a rogue council who just
Still 7 of them.
Yeah,
No,
they're-
no, you can still have road 4, I mean, you can still have road 4.
It goes back to the point that
I think we could all point to a lot of things where maybe
It could-
decisions have been made in government that, wow, I can't believe they did that.
it goes back to a point that I made a while ago, that if we just simply adopted the third-class city code as the charter and added the referendum provision, that would be a step forward for the city, because then as you saw something that you didn't like in third-class city code, you could change it by referendum.
Well, and that's probably a great way to go. Maybe I'm okay with that.
So we'll just
So-
stop all the, people just adopt the third-class city code as the home rule charter and
Don't
put
do
one.
that, please.
Yes.
Don't do.
Don't
Adopt
adopt
the
it.
third class, there are too many.
Oh, no. No, I mean, yeah, the referendum is the way to check the
Yeah.
road council.
And that's also the way to fix any mistakes that we potentially make here too. But, when you are moving from third-class city code to the home rule charter, and when you are looking at all these charters and the flexibilities they create, you are moving to a situation that allows city council to run the city in a much more effective and efficient manner, which is why we're here sort of in the first place, to try to get out of Act 47 and allow them the flexibility to run it in a more efficient manner. And if they choose, as you mentioned, to not have a city engineer and subcontract that out because they can drive efficiency, then they'll have to live with those consequences, or be voted out, and then vote somebody else in who'll bring back a full-time city engineer. You can pick on any department here, but there's examples of everything.
And I'm just thinking out loud, I'm just wondering how effective a city manager can be if they are running one or multiple departments, as well as being in charge of the day-to-day operations of all departments. I also feel some hesitation in giving city council too much power, only because it takes a certain amount of years being in council to gain a level of expertise within city government, and let alone city administration, and the department heads themselves. If we did write it into the charter in the way that it is today, I believe you do have a certain level of expertise in city planning.
Depends who you talk, depends who you talk to about that.
But they would only be changing so many each year, like you'd always have that experience and, the history there with the only
With city
changing one
council.
too, right? So you're not gonna have a whole, because that would be a concern, you're right, if you got, a whole new slate of people that didn't have any history or any knowledge, but I think.
Well, and I mean, like, I'm sure that Councilman Hare and Councilman Butterbaugh are both very passionate and committed to the city, but how much expertise do they really have in city planning? And I don't necessarily think that, I mean, like, Dave, maybe you would agree, or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but, I mean, that's why we hire professionals.
But at some point, you gotta trust somebody in this whole process. Either you trust the 7 city councilmen. We already decided we weren't gonna trust the mayor to appoint these people. Well, we've already given the city manager the power to fire him tomorrow. I mean, he can get fired tomorrow if he wants, but somebody has to have the ability to fire somebody. So at some point, you're trusting in somebody along the line to administer this. And, I go back to the changing of departments, or the putting the city manager at the head of the police department. They're not going to do unreasonable things. I mean, we're hoping that they're going to make rational decisions for rational reasons. And to try to micromanage the whole process through this, we could definitely go that direction, but that wasn't the flexibility that we were looking to go to home rule to provide.
Larry, this is Dave. I think you should definitely get the statement in the charter somewhere. Somebody should be able to fire somebody else.
It's already,
Go back to firing again.
Yeah.
Council can fire the solicitor and the manager and the city clerk.
Yeah, I
There
mean,
you go.
at some point, the people don't get, it's not complete democracy for all these representative form of government. You elect them and you trust them to make the right decisions. If they don't, vote them out.
I'm okay pending a possible exclusion that we might add down the road to.
Yeah, I think.
So I
with this whole
I
argument.
just want to know,
Yeah.
I just want to know further.
And it may
I can
be.
put this in? I can put this in?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that as we talk about some of the departments that are addressed here, we may find the need to memorialize some other departments. And I'm open to that possible suggestion.
What I'd say, especially for the department heads here, is if there was some way to
If you think you need to
say,
Be written in.
yeah, well, actually, no, I'm not asking for you to be written in, because I think that's specifically what we
Getting
may
away from.
not be doing, but to write in what type of training or professionalism you need to be in charge of what department.
This is somewhat contradictory to the discussion we had last time, where we just took all the training requirements out for the city manager.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Okay,
I
well,
went
I'm
along-
saying
I went
we,
along with that, but I'm not so sure I thought that was a great idea.
at the last meeting, we said we'd leave it up to city council, but we're not gonna elect an idiot, and,
Mhm.
or not going to appoint an idiot in this
Yeah.
case. The people might elect the idiot, I forgot about that. But,
Okay.
you know, we were going to not put the constraints on them of what type of person they must hire, but we think that we're going to trust in them to hire a person that's best qualified for the job, and not put some artificial.
So Richard, you're saying that you're okay with this, we might need to tweak it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might need to,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, and I
You
think
okay
that
with
that's
this
the
and
case.
Tweak it the next.
I would be okay with it in the interim, not in
Final
long
draft.
term.
Yeah. And I think all these are, let's move it over to your draft. I think that, you know, it's everyone's duty to look through some of these other charters, read some of the other prohibitions or enumerations that are in them, and add to it or detract from this as a baseline. And I think that that's going to be the case with all of these articles going forward, that we're not saying Farrell's is the, I'm not saying that Farrell's is the best, I'm saying it's the broadest basis of an outline to start from, in a very simple and generic format. Some of them, I think, go to where we'll end up and add a bunch of other, you know, specific provisions in.
And I don't disagree with that, I mean specifically to the sentence that Bob was talking about. I don't, like, right now, in my mind, and I could be wrong, and please, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but, or, you know, bring forth your opinions, but the city manager also being the finance director, to me, right now, is a conflict of interest, and I would want to prevent that in the future.
Without knowing the specific duties that he performs, I guess I couldn't say that it was a conflict of interest, but.
The problem I have with the direction that we're going with administrative departments is, without the administrative departments being defined, I don't know how you preclude various functions or directors from a department that hasn't been defined to not coexist. So, you know, I think it's a chicken or the egg kind of situation where you can't say you can't be the police chief when we haven't even said to have a police chief.
Well, what do you think about the current situation, the fact that he holds 3 positions?
I
right
think the
now?
city council is allowing it to happen if there's enough public uproar to say we don't think the person should hold 2 or more positions. But then there's also, you know, we're trying to drive efficiency and trying to find the right person. You know, there's all kinds of reasons, which I hope that the city council will be abreast of, you know, leading to that
So,
situation.
Larry, with the consent of council, the manager may temporarily serve as head of one or more such departments. How do you like that?
I like that.
Does that fix it?
Yes, as long as we don't find temporary.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I would be against that, but.
Should I put temporarily in for temporarily?
You may do that.
So I can move this whole thing over with temporarily.
For now, until,
Okay.
yeah, until we.
And what about a department head can maybe appointed to 2 or more?
Well, that'd be up to the manager then, wouldn't it?
Right.
Because that's what it says here. City manager may serve as head of one or more such departments, offices, or agencies, or may appoint one person as the head of 2 or more of them.
With council.
That's all with council approval.
Correct.
So he may either serve as those himself, or he could say, you know, say they hired a new city manager, and he wanted to reappoint Omar as both the finance director and the human resources, he could do so. To use the real life example, which was the current situation before the current city manager retired, correct?
Which, in fact, he is temporarily in charge.
But if we're gonna allow, you know, my only disagreement with that, we're gonna allow the city to run as efficiently as possible if they determine that, okay, we do have 2 departments, we don't wanna abolish the departments or combine the departments, but we think that the workload justifies only one person, this allows for them to make that decision.
I think it's, what even, you're just talking about the manager temporarily, not any other department,
Right.
right?
I know, no problem.
Okay. So
They're
a
just saying
man,
the
a
manager.
department head can run more than one
Right,
department
right.
as it states, but the manager, you're saying
Right.
that's
Temporary.
enough of a
That
job
makes
that,
sense.
yeah,
It does.
that's enough of a job on its own that he shouldn't be burdened with
Correct.
running additional departments.
Are
I
you
can
okay
agree
with
with that. I can agree with that.
Everybody okay with
Yes.
Yes.
that? Well, good, then I'll put it in the next draft, so we really don't need to bring anybody else, because we're just going to have a temporary,
Yeah.
right? Okay, all right. I'll put it in the next draft, you'll see. Thank you.
Okay,
Helps me tremendously.
we have about another half hour here. Does anyone have a preference of whether we talk about city clerk or city attorney?
Maybe we can do both.
We can.
These should be easy, maybe my clerk, you might
Okay.
We just want one.
Way in the back.
Let's look at, flip forward, back,
Or we're gonna do first.
city clerk, when it comes first. Appointment and compensation, the city council shall appoint city clerk for indefinite term and shall fix compensation. Is that currently the city council does appoint city clerk?
Indefinite, he really is indefinite.
Council may remove city clerk at any time with or without cause. It's typical.
At will.
City clerk shall, and then here's where we sort of get into the micromanagement, but you sort of have to have a job description as well, so. Attend all meetings of council and shall keep full minutes of its proceedings. That's the current duty, I assume. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
2, transcribe the bylaws, rules, regulations, resolutions, and ordinances into appropriate books kept for those purposes. Correct?
Yes, she's in charge of it.
Preserve the records and documents of the city and shall have custody of the corporate seal.
Correct.
Shall certify copies of any book, paper, record, bylaw, rule, regulation, resolution, ordinance, or other proceedings of city under the seal of the city. Shall attest to the execution of all instruments and all records of all ordinances. I might add some more examples. Shall file, record proof of service for all notices required by law, ordinances, and his certificate thereof shall be good evidence of such notice. Now you gotta remember, this was written in 1973, so you can make it politically correct
Yeah.
if you would like.
Because you could just make it, we could just make it her.
Yeah.
Why not?
Shall deliver to the successor the seal of all books, papers, and other records that matters belonging to the city. Perform such other duty as required by the manager or city council. Is that currently, you work for the manager and city council?
That's pretty much your job.
We don't need to put mayor there? But
He's on council.
he's on council, so.
It's very, that's real.
So, I mean, it's, like I said, Farrell's pretty short and sweet, if you think you need to add something else, but.
So, well, I think maybe we do want to add mayor, because council would, it's not a council member, it's council, so council would have to act as one. So it would have to be voted for.
Who does the city clerk's performance evaluation?
Mayor and council.
Council, mayor, council.
Well,
Okay, so then you probably ought to include the mayor in that, either by title or just by elected leadership.
yeah, now here in this case, since the city clerk is not a department, under the administrative code that we just talked about, administrative departments, there is no provision in the city clerk specifically for that yearly personnel evaluation.
Well, pardon the interruption, but she's a full-time employee of the city.
No, it's a specifically enumerated employee of the city, which is outside that administrative department code we just talked about. So for instance,
I don't think that's true. I think that even the enumerated people are still within this personnel department code thing that we just talked about.
well, let's take a step back, Larry. If we didn't put the city clerk section in here whatsoever, would that administrative departments, would that allow city council the ability to have or not have a city clerk and to define it as they would wish under this establish
If
boards,
they put it in
commissions,
the
authorities.
administrative code, if they would put it in the administrative code.
I
They
would
wanna make sure
suggest
that the
keeping
city
it in
clerk
just
is-
like that.
I mean, this forces them to have a city
Yes,
clerk.
it does. Which
we-
makes sense.
Which we probably think is a good thing, but does having it out here on its own remove it from all these other provisions under the personnel system?
Unless it specifically says that in the administrative code, but in the current administrative code, the city clerk is covered, city solicitor's covered. Everybody's in that, so it's council's direction.
Okay. Is there anything that needs added to, this administrative department section or to this to say per the personnel system requirements of the administrative departments, or is that necessary?
It's
or
not currently.
Is it sort of assumed?
I
or-
think it is.
Or they will adopt by
Yes.
administrative code the same
Yes,
provisions that they
yes.
have otherwise?
Mhm. That gives them the ability to do that.
Okay.
So I may not be hearing everything, but, and Linda, this does not refer to you specifically, but does the city clerk have a performance evaluation annually?
No, not anymore.
Okay, now Larry, should, according to the administrative code, the city clerk have a performance evaluation?
I'm not sure that I can recall that, Dave. That's,
Well,
it's a pretty thick document.
in this particular case, though, if we adopted this administrative departments, which says you must have all employees shall participate in yearly personnel evaluation, with that provision,
Yes.
and that oversee also the city
Yes,
clerk.
yes.
So that provision serves both.
Mhm.
Because that would be an employee, all employees shall participate in yearly personnel review.
Do we want to put
So
the
that
word
would,
all?
that would mean,
That's not there.
Currently, I don't know that the administrative code requires.
Council is developing that right now. There is a committee
Does it?
developing the yearly evaluations and procedures
Because I
for
don't think it's
yearly.
required right now.
Part of Act 47 that we're doing that already, so
Okay.
we're still working on that.
Richard, you had just read all, but I'm looking at 11.11, 1103, which I think if you're just staring at, administrative departments.
yeah, correct.
But I don't see all, so should we start under 8?
Well, no, all is on number 11, for the, all employees shall participate in a yearly personnel evaluation.
Okay.
I agree, that's
All
what you
right,
said, you said
go
at the
back.
beginning.
Yeah, go back to A1, mayor
Okay.
principal. To mayor principal. A1, really, couldn't sit on that, I think.
Yeah.
Just start that.
Personnel
sentence.
roles?
Yeah, just,
Promotions of
no,
all
right
city
above that, mayor principal.
Okay, current positions and future
All,
appointments.
just put the word all there, all current positions and future appointments and promotions of city officers. employees, and so forth.
So that includes everyone but the elected people.
Right, and because I'm also thinking this is gonna be the city
How,
manager.
well, how does it apply to sort of third-party service providers, I guess, as well, but that's sort of different situation.
What's that city officers doing?
Okay. What would you consider, what do you,
Me?
specifically, yeah?
No, I'm a consultant.
That's what I mean, so are they reviewed in some way, or you just rehired basically?
They're just rehired. Now, they have a full-time city solicitor, they had one before I took over. And I'm now part-time city solicitor, and I'm not an employee, but Bob was considered an employee.
Well, and I think this goes to this whole administrative departments and how are we providing the city with the flexibility to hire and create departments that are full-time employees of the city versus using part-time or third-party consultants for various operations.
Right. If you required a full-time solicitor, then there was a cost to that.
Yeah, correct. And I'm for providing the city into the future the ability to evaluate private, for instance, IT, and I know they're going through an IT audit now, but, is it more efficient for us to use a third-party provider IT services or to have a full-time employee of the city? And I don't prescribe to know the answer to that, and I don't want to write in here the answer, but I'd like to allow the flexibility to either outsource it as a third-party service or to, if they think it's more efficient, hire it internally and run it internally.
I'm fine with that. It'd be nice to put in here, all current positions, future appointments, and I don't know how you phrase it, but recurring, consultants.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure where
That if
that, where
you're-
it does
if
go.
you're-
but-
Yeah, if you're gonna be a consultant, like if you hire a consultant for 1 year, what's the point of doing a personnel review for them? But if you're gonna go back to the same people year and year and year again, then it seems like you should do a review of that
Well,
consultant.
and I don't know, in
before you
reading through this, it
renew.
specifically addresses, which,
You would have a contract
Yeah.
for these services, so you would have, at the end of that contract, you'd have an option to renew
extend
the
it.
contract or not based on their performance.
You just wouldn't hire one.
Yeah, you just wouldn't hire them,
How
right?
long are the contracts typically?
Which contract?
Like with yours specifically?
I don't know that it's a term.
I think,
There's a definite
well,
term.
I understand that you wouldn't hire them, that's the ideal case, but I'm not gonna preclude the case that some of these contracts just don't continue to get renewed. And no one questions whether there should be a review or not.
So there is no review.
It's kind of like,
For you.
it's kind of like the city manager who we've had for years and years that never had a review. I mean, who would have imagined that they wouldn't have had a review of the city manager for so
well, I think maybe what we should do is look at the city attorney and see how it speaks differently and see if that addresses some of our concerns.
Are we done with clerks?
I think we are at this, I think that, I think with Larry's direction that the administrative departments and the personnel requirements therein also would cover any full-time employee, whether they be specifically enumerated in the charter or hired or created by the council, that code applies both.
I think, so going back to city clerk, did we include the mayor when you say as required by the
I don't
manager
think it would
council
hurt.
at the very end?
I think you make everybody your boss.
They already, it already.
Mayor and all city residents.
I think part of the whole thing that you were saying about evaluation, I was evaluated, it was a long time ago, I think it's because we work so closely with them, all Larry, myself, the manager, and council, that they see it, you know what I mean, it's a constant, I mean, not that they
It
evaluate.
does force you to take a
on
step
day-to-day.
back and.
I agree,
and-
but you're always being
Yeah.
evaluated, you know?
If we-
Richard Clarence, did you say you wanted the mayor to be included in the performance evaluation process?
No.
No, that's not what I said.
You thought you got an ally?
Did I hear that wrong? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, I
lost,
thought I made a friend.
lost in translation. If we could look maybe next, in the time we have left, at Article 10, city attorney. This reads a little bit differently. The city council shall appoint a city term attorney for an indefinite term and shall fix his compensation. He shall be an official of the city and shall be appointed either as on a full-time basis or part-time basis or on a retainer basis. So this is, I think this might be in conflict with the way it currently exists, but Larry will.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Just talking with Linda. She brought up a point about, in the third-class city code right now, the clerk has the power to administer oaths.
You're required to be a notary too.
It says the city clerk shall have the power of a notary. It doesn't say she will be a notary,
That's
he
one
or
of
she.
the questions I was asked.
Administer oaths. Any notary in the state of Pennsylvania can administer oaths. Like, for instance, I'm a notary. I swore in council.
I swear on all the police officers and fire.
Linda can, but she's a notary also. Any notary can. What the third-class city code did was, even if they weren't a notary, they could administer oaths pertaining to the business of the city. So,
City clerk.
Inside or out.
they'd be required.
They're not
clerk to be a
required to
notary.
administer the oaths, but they can.
Right,
Yeah. Seems reasonable.
but maybe you require the city clerk to be a notary. And then you don't,
That covers it.
this is kind of goofy where it says the city clerk shall have the power of a notary. They're not really a notary.
Yeah. So in ours, you would either be silent on it, in which case they'd have to figure something out or
Right.
make sure they
Or a notary.
consider that whenever they do their hiring, or we can force them to make that be a requirement of the job position.
Right.
Do you think this is important?
I think it's very important. You have to have a clean record.
Jimmy, you think they should require a notary for the city clerk?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
Because what if you don't think of it when you come on council? You
There's
might
so
not.
many things you have to do next year,
I mean, you can give somebody,
for the city.
90 days to get their, license or something when you hire them.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a requirement for hiring.
We'll
but
stick it in the
would be a
middle there
requirement
somewhere, I don't know if
for
you wanna put it at the end, because
No.
it sort of ends with other such duties, so.
No, the city pays for it, but I don't notarize anything other than.
It's a
city
long process
documents.
too.
I just
Well,
wanna
in,
make sure.
in most other
But I don't
sections, it's
charge.
under
About 90 days.
qualifications,
It's under 90 days.
and so it would be
We're like
appointment, compensation. Oh, we would say, do it like they do city manager on the previous
Maybe
page.
within the first year.
So 11 point, the first section there,
Oh, okay.
subsection, appointment, qualification, and compensation.
Yeah, you see what he's saying, if you flip forward to the city manager, on that charter, flip back one more page. See how their first section is appointment, qualification, and compensation? But they didn't do that for the next one on city clerk. So that first one could be appointment, compensation, and qualifications.
And then add the,
Yeah, that'll be another.
within 1 year of the
Yeah.
appointment.
Which would allow you to hire a qualified person, but have them become one. Something like yourself, who's the gap, I guess. Okay, if we can look at city attorney then. You may have to advise us here on how this reads, because I'm not sure that. So the council shall appoint the city attorney for the indefinite term and shall fix compensation. He shall be an official of the city and shall be appointed either as full-time basis or a part-time basis or on a retainer basis. And he shall serve the city as needed and required. The city attorney shall be admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. So does that allow for a third, does that statement as it's written allow for a third party? I would think it would have to if you could be appointed on a part-time or retainer basis.
Yes, what I would like to see there is, and this is in the second-class township code, it's not in the city code, but it is in the third-class city code, but it is in the township code, and it makes sense. They allow the appointment of a firm,
Not just a person.
not just a person, because in the third-class city code, it's the city solicitor and the assistant, or assistant solicitors. So you have to appoint a specific person. With a firm, what's nice about that is, in my firm, we have a litigation department. I don't handle litigation, so what, we had to have an assistant appointed to handle litigation. Second-class township codes realized that, and they thought, well, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's like hiring a firm of accountants instead of one accountant.
Yeah, you're interviewing for the firm's
Firm,
qualifications
yes.
and their firm's rates.
Usually have a
Versus
point person like me,
specific person.
coming to the meetings and doing that sort of thing. But I would recommend that if you guys would be okay with that.
Yeah, and I think, as you go to, hiring an engineering firm or something like that, you're hiring the body that particular, company can provide services, not just.
Different people have different expertise, and you can get that right there. So,
Can we just add something that says, like, city attorney in quote shall be construed as being a person or a firm?
yeah, that would be good.
And this still allows for the city, if they choose, to hire a
Yeah.
specific person in-house, if
That's
they,
exactly right.
if
It
they
would.
feel in the future it's necessary.
I just have a quick question. It says council shall appoint a city attorney for an indefinite term. They also included that language in for the city manager. And I was just, obviously there's a reason that they put indefinite term, and I was wondering what your interpretation of that is. Like, why would we specifically say an indefinite?
So they don't have to keep reappointing them. As long as they're satisfied with them, then they can continue.
You still have a contract for a certain amount of
You
time.
do. Mhm. Well, it's an indefinite term. You probably have
So
seen
you get no
renewal every
raise.
year or whatever, yeah. But that, yes, right. The compensation can always be increased, depending, you don't have to amend the contract, they just increase the compensation, or decrease it, that's all,
If it's for an
If you don't like it, they fire you.
If it's for an indefinite term, though, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding it. Why have a contract then?
Well, it sets forth what you will be doing for them.
Especially when you're dealing with a firm or a third
yes,
party.
For instance, if they pay you a retainer, here's what the retainer covers, here's what your hourly rate will cover. Because sometimes the retainer, well, never does the retainer cover litigation, because that's an an hourly rate, it's just too hard to determine how much you need to charge for that. So that's all set forth in the agreement. There's certain terms you want to make sure are in there, like retainers usually cover coming to the meetings, preparing certain ordinances, that sort of thing.
So the contract could be amended, but does it have a time frame?
It may be year to year, and it automatically renews, I can't recall.
Okay.
But if you raised your rates and they didn't like them, they just
get rid of it, yes.
And I think that, the next one, they remove the city attorney at any time
will.
with or without cause. So if we don't put indefinite term, like some of the things I think in the third class city code, you just have to reappoint, like you have to be reappointed every 4 years.
Supposed to, the clerk is supposed to.
I mean, it just forces them to do a
Well,
procedural.
it's rarely done.
Procedural thing. Okay, so just do indefinite and just get rid of the.
Because, yeah, if they don't want to reappoint her, they'll get rid of her.
Yeah.
Or me, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, if she has a bad evaluation, you can get rid of her. Same.
Okay, moving on. So we're going to add something about a firm in
Yes,
the first
I
section.
think Richard's definition is good.
Okay. The city attorney shall be the chief legal officer of the city and shall have the following powers and duties. He shall furnish legal advice to the council, to the manager, and to all boards and commissions concerning any matter or thing arising in connection with the exercise of their office powers or performance of the official duties, and except for otherwise expressly provided by council, shall supervise, direct, and control all of the law work of the city. In the event that a legal conflict between council and council-created boards and commissions, council shall provide funds for legal counsel on that board or commission.
What that's referring to is the zoning hearing board. You can't be the solicitor for both the zoning hearing board and the city. It's just not prohibited. It's prohibited under the municipality planning code.
So they hire their own.
They have to have their own
Yeah.
solicitor.
But you currently are
Yes.
every commission board, everything in the city.
Well, except for, commission, boards, yes. That's
So unless there's a conflict,
right.
this city solicitor or the firm.
What about the RA?
That's a municipal authority. It doesn't say authority here. That's what I was looking at lately.
So it's boards, commissions,
In the council.
and council,
Mhm.
and mayor. And therefore, also, if a firm was appointed
See the
or
same
hired,
thing.
you could appoint different key people to those different, with those expertise in that
That's
particular
exactly
board or
right.
commission.
Exactly.
Currently, you have to do it all, or your deputy?
I do, or the assistant solicitor.
So is there anything there that you think is missing, or?
I think that's fine.
Okay. City attorney shall collect or cause to be collected by suit or otherwise all debts, taxes, and accounts due to the city, and shall be placed with him for the collection of any officer, department, board, or commission, and shall represent the city in every officer, department, board, or commission in all litigation. Anything?
We may need to tweak that because the city for its fire, the ordinance we just passed for the fire fees. So
Well,
I might need to tweak that. a little.
Well, but this goes to another point. Is this saying too much? Is this necessary? Or does number one encompass that, or, I think it's.
Yeah, really, that's true. You may not even need that.
Are there cheaper ways to go and collect some of these things? So that
There
they're
could
going
be,
through a
like
long
That's to me,
what I
cycle?
was just talking about.
Is this making this your responsibility? Is that handcuffing the city from maybe doing something else first? They're gonna turn it over to you anyhow.
Right,
This could
right,
be a
right.
legal issue.
Let me look at that. I think we could probably take that out. Since I haven't looked at this before,
Yeah.
I'd just like to study it.
He shall prepare or approve all contracts, bonds, or other instruments in writing which the city is concerned, and shall approve all surety bonds required to be given for the protection of the city.
Yes, yeah,
Real reason not to have that.
Right.
At the direction of council shall investigate any violation or alleged violation within the city of statutes of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or the United States of America, or if ordinances of the city or county, and shall take such steps and adopt such means as may be reasonably necessary or appropriate to enforce or cause the enforcement within the city of such statutes or ordinances.
I think that's fine. It says at the direction of council.
Okay, so you don't have to do everything. Yeah.
Right.
The problem with number 2 is it says
I have to.
you're doing.
Right, right.
This says, okay, if they want you to do it, they'll have you do it. So maybe even that, at the direction of council, you could add at the beginning of number 2.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That would make it not necessarily.
All right, I will do that. I like that.
Number 3, though, you wouldn't, I mean, wouldn't you maybe put the direction of council all of these? Or some of them things that you and only you must do?
I think 2, 3, 4, and 5 is fine. Number 1 is pretty much they're appointing me, so I
Yeah.
will have to abide.
No, but I'm saying like 3, is that something that the direction of council you should put in front of 3, or is 3 something that must be done by the city attorney?
It's usually done by the city attorney.
Okay. 5, upon the request of council or the chairman of any committee of the city or the manager, the city attorney shall prepare any ordinance or resolution for presentation before the council. What do you do? You write the legalese, huh? At the direction of council, so using interchangeably, this one, at the direction of council, he shall appear for and represent the city, or if appropriate, the residents of the city as a class on matters before various regulatory agency or other government bodies.
Again, it's fine.
And then the last one, the city attorney shall have the right to access all times to the records of any officer, department, board, or commission of the city as necessary to perform the duties of the city
I
attorney.
like that one. I think that should stay in there.
You know, here
You should
again,
have a road department head,
Yeah.
you can't get at the.
here again, in preparation for our next meeting, you kinda gotta look at some of these other charges and see if there's something we missed that needs to be in there, or some sort of power or enumeration with both the city clerk and the city attorney, because it's easy to see whether you agree with what's there or not. It's hard to judge whether something's missing, that you feel must be required. Going to Richard's point from before, though, how these are organized, or, you know, whether we sort of move towards the table of contents of the Farrell Charter, or whether we sort of stick with the Easton format that we had adopted and combine these subsections within those. You know, I think it's a formatting issue, and make it as clear as possible in the future. So.
What is, if we're putting off all the financial aspects, so we're putting until after mid-April, so that would be the treasurer, controller,
And
financial procedures, possibly contracts. So if we're looking at Farrell, that puts us down into, and recall, we're not gonna have that anyway, because
Yeah,
it's
it's-
cost too
Can't
much.
do that, that's right.
So that puts us down into these general provisions, the transition, that seems like the last thing we should be doing. That puts us down into the initiative and referendum. Is that kind of where we're slated? I'm looking at what the
Yeah.
flow of material is in the Easton thing.
I guess my only other question as far as the Farrell goes is whether or not, in the current draft, and I have to review it to make sure, whether or not our city manager was enumerated as clearly as what their city manager ended up being. I mean, our mayor and our city council are significantly different, so they're not anywhere close to apples, but the city manager, was it 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, Article 8, I think we followed somewhat the format that Easton had, where it's kind of a subset of the mayor. Yeah, Article 3 was mayor and city administrator, which we changed to city manager to keep consistent. I don't know if we want to look at that, or if that was a different can of worms, in the fact that how do we already empower the mayor, and does that conflict with this, and it doesn't really jive with what we have already done.
I guess we can always move them around,
Yeah.
just to get them, and there's the important.
Yeah, I guess I just,
Looking
well,
at where we go
I hate to
from
go,
here.
yeah, I hate to go back to the mayor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then Easton, looking at Easton, they go on to, after these things, initiative two, I believe.
Yeah, this transition.
Yeah, elections, referendum and initiative, and then after that, some of the finale stuff. So it looks like it's mainly the referendum and initiative.
We're getting
Conflicts of interest, elections, that kind of stuff is, the next meeting.
We agree back to the names, you still do the salaries.
salaries. And I have one thing too, if I could, Mr.
Yep,
Chair.
go ahead.
When I was going over the draft that I handed out, because it didn't come out, clearly, but you see along the sides there, these lines, that usually indicates where there's been a change. On F, C-2.05 prohibitions, we talked about this the last time. And I wanted to bring it to your attention. F, where it says no council member shall serve as an employee of any municipal authority which is created solely or jointly by the city with one or more political subdivisions until 1 year after the expiration of the term for which the member is elected or appointed to council. Now, we talked about this the last time, remember? And then Heather pointed out, oh, it says employee. And we said, okay, because I think the consensus was a member of council could be a member of an authority, just didn't want them to be an employee. And I got to thinking about that when I was doing this, and as I recall, the city authority, at least, or the water authority, appoints their members as officers of the authority. They have like a secretary, treasurer, that sort of thing. That is an employee of the municipality. They're an employee of the municipality.
Absolutely.
So what I added here, if you want to look at this language, and this was for a suggestion only, is I added a council member, however, during such council member's term of office shall be eligible for appointment to any such municipal authority and shall be eligible, if so appointed, to serve as an officer of any such municipal authority. That clarifies.
A potential conflict
Right.
that we have created.
Yeah, because they could be on there as a member, now they can't serve as an officer. You might need them to serve as an officer. I'm just throwing that in there, you can take a look at that, but I think that clarifies, and forgive me, I forgot to bring that up when we spoke the last time, so.
So next one, we have to do the salaries, right?
Salaries.
Still have to
Do
do
or
that.
not do.
That's been like,
And
what,
then
3 months
Down
now?
the road, remember?
Mayor and council.
Yeah, the council salary.
And then we talked about.
Well, controller too, if you're keeping one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say, because we talked about bringing in some people for interviews, we wanna do that next time before we go too
You
far
didn't want to
ahead.
come and talk
Oh,
AC
about
that's
doesn't
right,
wanna
I'm
come.
sorry, I apologize.
We may want to talk to some of the city departments, fire and police.
Should we do that stuff before we move on to the end things, or?
I thought we were okay with the language. You know, adding the temporarily.
Yeah, I think we.
Probably so. I could check. We don't have
You
to do
can
it
let
in the
me
meeting,
know,
but I
and
can go.
if you just change your mind.
Yeah, right. I'll have some conversation. So.
Okay. Paul's okay, I'm okay.
So, but what we're saying is basically, and I don't know, the contracts is another sort of big one, and that's not something that would need necessarily AC. If Omar was maybe available, we could maybe tackle the contracts in the next meeting or two. It wouldn't necessarily have to be at the next meeting.
I think some of these also have sections on ordinances about the process of ordinances.
Yeah, well, up here, number 5, ordinances and resolutions.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I guess, looking at the Farrell, the front page,
right.
we sort of have powers of the city in here. and we can do that.
Take a look at
Of
that.
these names and boundaries, I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but,
So we're gonna look at ordinances next time?
well, I'm looking here. We haven't really done names and boundaries, I'm not sure what
Oh,
the.
one other thing too, you never said, you had questions about residency,
Correct.
how long the person has to be in the city, a resident of the city in order to run for office. I don't see where the Constitution of Pennsylvania governs that at all. they do govern a senator or a legislator. You have to be here 4 years, a senator does, has to be a resident of the state for 4 years. However, it does talk about, the Constitution talks about an elector. You know, what you have to be an elector, qualifications you have to have, as does our election code. And under the Home Rule law, one of the things the Home Rule Charter can't change is the registration of electors and the conduct of elections. We cannot change that in our home, but it doesn't say anything about residency, like you guys were asking about. So for a person to be able to vote, they have to be 18, they have to live in the U.S. for at least a month, and they have to live in the state for 90 days immediately preceding the election. And he or she shall reside in the election district where he or she shall offer to vote at least 30 days immediately preceding the election. So you would think you wouldn't want to make it any less than what an elector.
Which is why a lot of the charters said that the mayor has to be a qualified elector of the
Yeah,
city.
well,
Remember, I asked for
And then
clarification
he's
as to
asking, do we want
why
to go
they
a
put
step
that in
further
there.
and go to 1 year in addition to being a qualified
Right.
elector, or just go with the qualified elector, which would mean 30 days?
Right. So that's,
Prior to
that's
pulling
something
the
you guys,
petition,
yeah,
prior to pulling the petition, or
prior to being elected, I guess.
so I guess you could pull the petition.
Preceding the election, the date of the election. So,
I think to file a petition, you have to be an elector. I think that's one of the.
You have to have residency, you have to have established residency.
Yes.
Qualification.
Let's define established residency.
Defined by the county.
but in the courts,
I
do,
think-
there are all kind of cases.
Yeah, it could, whenever we went to run for this, we had to say what our current address was, we'll be in full petition, so.
And you swear that you are a elector of the district of which you're running in.
So I assume you couldn't take a petition for council unless you were
An
already.
elector.
Yeah.
So an elector has to be here at least 30,
Yeah, well, longer than that.
30 days immediately preceding the election.
The thing is, there's a primary.
On which election, the primary or the general?
Whatever election you want to vote in.
So it'd be the primary first. You can get the general without the primary.
Well, you can. And in fact, that's gonna be the only time when this could possibly come up, is that,
Well, I throw it out there in case, it has to be in one of our future agendas because you never did establish
Okay.
what the residency was. So most of, what is it, a year? City, class city code, is it a year? I think. Most of them.
Okay, well, we're running over in time here a little bit. We put down the agenda for next time.
So what do we have on the agenda?
So we have salary and residency on the mayor and council.
Okay.
That should somewhat tidy up those two. I'm not quite sure without reviewing whether or not we sufficiently took care of city manager, because that kind of tailed off at the end of all the council and mayor, but, to possibly look at city manager as it relates to Farrell's, just to make sure that the city manager is effectively, powers are effectively enumerated in our current draft. That should finish up all of that. We'll have the drafts of the three that we went through today on the administrative department, city clerk, city attorney. And, starting at the top and just cleaning up some of these names and boundaries, powers of the city. I know powers of the city is in here, names and boundaries. I'm not sure without reviewing it if that's something. So we can take care of 1 and 2. And then they have operation and procedures. So 3, 4 are taken care of already by things we've done. 5, ordinances and resolutions. You look at that. Everyone agreeing on that? And councilmatic inquiries and investigations if we get to it. So 1, 2, 5, and 6 from the Farrell.
And then salaries, residency, and.
Well, those would be first.
You're skipping 4, and then, operation procedures.
I'm saying we already covered that.
Is it?
Operational procedures.
Draft through
If you see something in any of those two that, you know, that's gonna be the case, whether it be Farrell or any of these others, if we see something in this. we'll have to-
I'll try to email you better copies. I didn't realize that didn't come out well.
You wanna try to get, you need to try to get Omar here for not this next meeting, but the following meeting.
Which one, which other one wasn't Wayne going to be able to make? I need to know if I'm in Wayne advance, I think it was pretty far out there. Yeah.
April 20.
First. Yeah, it was April 21st,
What's our next meeting?
April 7th.
3 weeks away.
Doesn't matter, I'm gonna check with
We
Wayne.
made a lot of progress. That was good.
Be back in a week or two now, once we go past mayor.
Why don't you just wait till May 5th, whenever AC is here also, I don't know.
Yeah, we can start the financial stuff then, if we think, between the ones we did here, and then we still have general provisions, transition, and referendum, we could do on the 21st. And then started to do all the financial stuff, contracts, and, controller over the next meeting or two, at the beginning of May. That will be done, right?
If you get done by Friday, we can vote on it in the primary.
Okay, sound like a game plan?